Education should be the key to success, and it should be accessible to everyone, regardless of gender, wealth class, or status. And what the government has done so far is that side government has proposed loan systems that should be implemented for students of what we would see like in Singapore. And what does this mechanism look like? Just to recall back, side government said that students should borrow money from the government, then only after they graduate, students are forced to pay government with strict time limit. And if they do not have jobs, they must work for the government with a wage. And they didn't talk about the wage, but I think the likelihood of the wage will be minimum wage. So in conclusion, what government is trying to do is limit freedom of graduating students, creating an environment where students have to be constantly worrying about debt and avoid loan sharks. And one more thing they have missed out on is the condition to win. And I think the condition for which side can win is that whichever side can prove that their mechanism can impact the vulnerable actor best, which is the students, should win. Mechanism should also be feasible and realistic. Now moving on to my rebuttals. Firstly, side proposition tried to make an argument that students should adopt a loan system like Singapore, where student owes money straight to the government rather than borrowing money from here and there, loan sharks, etc. But this won't work. Why? Firstly, with the current economic condition that Indonesia has right now, it's just not realistic that Indonesia could give huge sums amount of money to thousands or not even millions of people who are trying to enroll in university. Secondly, side prop tried arguing that by creating bonds with government, therefore the likelihood of them paying back is very high. I agree with this, but one thing that side government has failed to consider is the amount of stress that it builds up on the student. Why? Because rather than students taking a break after work, after university, they're directly pressurized to work immediately to pay back their student loan. This creates a lot of pressure. And lastly, side proposition tried talking about governments making workflow, therefore creating more job opportunities, which benefit both the countries and benefit the student too. Why? Because it is a two-way method that the country will increase in GDP and students will have job. But that is wrong. Two things. Firstly, the likelihood of creating stress again. The likelihood of creating more stress towards individual would be high, because rather than students taking a break after university to reconnect with family, they would be forced to work, resulting in stress. Secondly, by making this rule, it dilutes the idea of freedom, right? By making a very strict time limit of which students have to pay back their loan, this means that whatever job they can take, they will do, no matter the pay. This definitely strips their idea of freedom and definitely strips their dream. Now, I would like to be moving on to my substantive, right? But before that, I would like to highlight what side ops truly want. What we want is basically to make university accessible for everyone. We believe that education should result in a path of financial independency, but not a burden. My substantive will be based on 3 layers. Layer 1 is that there's context about Indonesia's wealth and Indonesia's economic situation that just does not support the chances of this mechanism actually happening, which leads also to my second layer, which I will be explaining on why the mechanism that side government is trying to support is not feasible. And finally, and my last layer, my third layer, of why this mechanism that side government makes, even though it can be implemented, will do more harm than good to students. First layer, regarding Indonesia economic status. I believe that Indonesia is at the current moment is not rich enough to make a loan system like Singapore. I believe that we cannot just simply hand out billions of rupiah to students, to thousands or millions of students. Because why? Because firstly, the urgency of this matter is not urgent enough. According to government, in government's eyes, there are still so many more things that should be subsidized. such as MBG or building infrastructures, right? So therefore, the amount of cash they have should not be given out just for university funds, but rather it should be used to subsidize other things. So even so, if they try to give out loans, I personally believe that they would give interest to this loan money. Why? Because of the urgency. Again, because government do not see this as an urgent matter. Therefore, the best way that government can implement this mechanism is to give interest. Why? So at least if in the near future inflation occurs by so much, they won't be losing too much, right? They would be obtaining the money which has the value same back of what the students borrowed back in the past. Now I would like to move on to my layer 2, which is also a continuation of layer 1 on why it is not feasible. I also believe that making bonds with government is not feasible because of the standard pay that government are giving, right? No matter how good it sounds that government are giving jobs, but the likelihood of these students, if they work for government, being paid good, it is very unlikely. Why? Because it is so much more likely, due to Indonesia's current economic system, economics condition, they would be paying minimum wage. And if we do the maths, moving on to analysis, let's say a student needs 1 billion to complete school, to pay for the whole university funds. How many years do they have to work if they are getting paid only 5 million a month? It's just not realistic. Therefore, it is not feasible. Not just that, government might receive public backlash because of the idea that they are stripping the dreams of which students can go to, right? For example, if students want to be an entrepreneur, they can't. Why? Because entrepreneurship takes a lot of time, which students don't have currently at the moment. Now, moving on to layer 3, regarding how it does more harm than good to students, and why it also harms the government and the reputation of government. No matter how much side government tries to blanket the negative side of borrowing money, it is completely undeniable that students will face financial pressure. This is because when we force students to do work, we strip their dreams and opportunities, which may result them to be depressed. Now, we are not fully blaming it on the government for doing so, right? Because of course our country still needs money, and when it comes to university rate, it is really high, and the country just cannot work without it. But the public will tend to focus that, oh, these governments are so well driven, right? Which may give public backlash. So what I think government should do is that they should subsidize university to eliminate poverty as it is, which makes it also so much more feasible because Indonesia does not have to monitor thousands of students, but rather just monitoring schools. It ensures less probability of slip-ups, and that is why I'm proud to propose.